everything.
Alright guys, in this next project we're going to be doing the Open Weather API project in AngularJs. What we're going to go over is we're going to obviously review data binding and setting up our app and our controller. If you haven't done the tribute page, I would do that one first, as that's what the video's main purpose is. We're also going to be using ng-href, which is going to allow us to dynamically set the href of anchor tags. We're going to be using our first filter to change things to uppercase by default. We're also going to be using ng-source as well as ng-init, where you can essentially initialize a variable using Angular, ng-show, and ng-click. We're going to be doing all these things, as well as ng-repeat, which is a crucial part of Angular and you use on a almost daily basis, I feel like, but those are the key concepts that we're going to cover. This is going to be in two parts, so go ahead and check out this first part where we get the foundation of it set up, and the second part where we connect some more of the logic as well as style it a bit. But as always, thanks for watching. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. Alright guys, today we are going to be doing Show the Local Weather project using AngularJs. Now, if you're not familiar with Angular, I do a previous version where it's the tribute page, where it goes over some of the more basic stuff. Don't sweat though. Each one of these is going to go pretty slow. I'm going to explain as we go along. So even if you're not comfortable with Angular, as long as you have an okay understanding of JavaScript, you should be able to follow along just fine. So what are we building? We're taking the intermediate project, Show the Local Weather, from Free Code Camp, and we're going to allow it to show our current location, weather by the current location, change a background image based on the weather. We're also then going to have a Fahrenheit or Celsius toggle button, and we're going to use the Open Weather API to do that. At the end of it, you'll have something like this, where you have a button. It's going to show the icon for the general weather, general description. We're going to use a couple other things as well, and then we're going to format this, and then this button's going to go ahead and show and hide based off when we click it. On my example, I throw a little bit of promotion on here, so we can go ahead and showcase how to throw some images in as well. One is to my channel, and the other is to my Patreon page. So if you want to support me, that's great. If not, it's great that you're just watching the video. So let's go ahead and jump in and get started. The first thing that we're going to need to do to get our Angular app, and I think we'll probably end up doing this in two different videos, is we're going to need to import Angular. For this, we just go ahead and open up our JavaScript and throw that in there. Now, the reason I'm doing it in CodePen instead of like a typical text editor is because this is going to be an introductory sort of learning process. I just wanted to make the barrier of entry a little bit less. We're also going to import Bootstrap to our CSS. Let's go ahead and save that as well. Cool. Now, what do we need to do here? We're going to go ahead and jump into the JavaScript portion of this first. So let's go ahead and do this. Zoom in a little bit. Now in Angular, you need to essentially instantiate the Angular application. The way that we're going to go ahead and do this, because we're using CodePen, we're going to go ahead and create a variable and call this class app. We're going to set this equal to the Angular module. And at this point, this is where we name the weather app. So this is the name of the application, and these other these brackets we're throwing in here, this array, this would be dependencies. So maybe we wanted to import lesser used parts of the Angular library. This is where we could do it for the time being, but don't worry about that for now. But this essentially is going to instantiate our app. At this point, we're going to go ahead and take our class app, and we're going to instantiate a controller. A controller is basically where all our code goes. And in this example, we're going to just go ahead and pass in the controller name, similar to how we name our app. And this is going to be weather CTRL. And then we're going to pass a function that we're going to use down the line. So let me go ahead and take this out. Now, the first thing that we're going to need to pass into this is something called scope. Scope is basically how the compiler knows to connect our code. Basically, it's how we connect variables in our JavaScript to output in our HTML. That's really what you need to know about scope. And for our example, instead of outputting scope every time, we're going to go ahead and actually just set scope to a variable like so. And this isn't something you have to do. This is really just something I do to shorten the... It's just a kind of a tip of the trade. So first thing that we are going to want to do now is, now that we have all this set up, this is basically our Angular app is set up, we have to go into the HTML and define where it's going to run. So we're going to go ahead and throw a body tag here, and we're going to throw another body tag. Typically, if we weren't working within CodePen, you would actually put the ng app that we're about to instantiate, you'd actually typically put this in your HTML. So remember how we had our app name, which we named weather app. We're going to go ahead and pass that into our ng app like so. We're also going to go ahead and pass in ng controller. Now, the application, this basically instantiates where our Angular app is going to run, and the controller is where our controller is going to run. Now, you can put these in the same thing, but you can never put the controller outside of the app. So just keep that in mind. And they don't have to be in the same spot as well. So we're going to go ahead and instantiate our ng controller. Go ahead and put weather controller. And there we go. So the first thing we want to do is make sure we have everything set up, because there could be a syntax there, there could be anything else. So let's go ahead and output a little something called test. So we'll put test, and then we're going to go over here and we'll put vm.test is equal to, and we'll just put some numbers, and that should output it just fine. So you'll see right here, everything's working, our test is going, and it's also a good example of how you would set an Angular value. Now, the way I like to start is I typically like to just get out all the HTML content. If you remember correctly, we had a section where we put the name of the project that we're working with. So let's go ahead and create a object, and we'll go ahead and put this, I'll put vm dot, I called it channel info. You can probably come up with a better name. And we're going to create a variable here called channel info. Within here, we're going to have a key value pair. And the heading is going to be, is what I call it, Open Weather API Project. And let's go ahead and output that right now. Now, if you're not familiar with how you would link these things, you just do dot notation. So channel info dot heading, and now we'll have our information out. Cool. So we have our Open Weather API project. Nice. We're gonna go ahead and do one more where we put another little subheading. I believe I called it subheading 1, and this was Free Code Camp front-end projects. Now that I'm looking at it, there's too many projects, so we're going to take that project out. Very nice. And you'll see we're going to slowly just start outputting kind of the general flow of what we want here. So we have channel info dot sub heading 1. And there we go. It's out there. Don't worry about the looks quite yet. If you wanted to continue on and put any API information like I did, you could do that as well. Actually, why don't we do that? So because maybe you have a portfolio, you'll want to do the same thing. So for your subheading 2, this might be where you put your portfolio link. For me, I'm going to go ahead and put my channel to link people back from CodePen who might want to follow more of my work. So to do that, just go ahead and put in the URL like you normally would. Or better yet, let's do a little bit of nesting. So we have subheading 2, and we want to create another object. One is going to be the name, and we'll maybe check out. Maybe we'll do check out my YouTube channel. So that'll be our text, and then we'll go ahead and we'll actually add a link value, and we'll just call this link. And this will be where we put our http www.youtube.com/coding tutorials360. Oops. Sorry, it's lagging a little bit there. Now, 1 comma. Okay, so I forgot to put the last quote here. That's where our error was. Little syntax error. But now, if we wanted to go ahead and get the text out, So check out my YouTube channel, or maybe you want to put check out my portfolio. You go to channel info dot subheading 2 dot name, and that will be outputted. All right, a little bit later on we'll actually assign this link to our subheading 2, but right now we're just worried about getting all the information out correctly. So what do we need to do next? Next we actually have to start doing the get calls. This will be pretty straightforward. If you don't have a API key quite yet, you're going to need to go over to OpenWeather and get your key. What we're going to do here is two things. First, we're going to get our we're actually going to go and get our we're going to need to instantiate HTTP. So remember how we instantiate scope here in our controller? We actually need to go ahead and do the same for HTTP. This is what we'll actually be using in order to do the get calls. You just need to basically say, hey, have our controller use this, and it'll know what it is. The way that you do a get call, there's a couple ways. The simplest way is to do HTTP get, and then you pass in the URL. In our case, to get our local location or geolocation, this is basically a free API that will give us your general location. It's based off your basically it's based off your internet service provider, like the nearest server. So it's close enough. So we're gonna go ahead and pass that in, and from here we're just gonna call .success that takes a function and returns some data that we then do something with that data. So you pass in the URL, and then on success you do something with the data. Now if you remember, we need to get our latitude and our longitude. So that would be data.lat and then data.long. So let's go ahead and create some variables here called vm.lat. We'll set that equal to data.lat, and we'll say vm.long, and we'll set that equal to data.long. So now that we have our latitude and longitude, we can go ahead and just nest another API call, because we're going to want to use the OpenWeather URL. But we're going to need to change something in our URL. First off, you're going to need an API key. So I like to create a variable. You don't have to do this, but perhaps your API key changes. This is the easiest way to swap it out. You have your API key. Pass that in. You can get this from OpenWeather's API page. You just have to apply for one. It takes about maybe 3 minutes, if that. And then we're going to go ahead and create a variable here that's going to actually be the URL we're going to pass in. So we'll call this var OpenWeather URL, and we'll set this equal to http://. I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy pasta this over here so I don't make any syntax errors, and I'll explain what we did here. So you'll see we have our vm.lat. So this is passing in our current latitude, and then the vm.long, and this is passing in our current longitude. I believe it was long. Yeah, so take that as Latin long, not long. And then for the app ID, this is actually where we paste in our API key. Basically, our complete URL now that we're going to pass in into an HTTP GET call to get some data from there. So we're going to do the same thing. Get, and in here we're just going to pass in OpenWeather URL. And then we're going to call .success. That is then going to pass a function in that takes more data that we're actually going to do some stuff with. So now that we're here, what do we need from here? Well, it's been a minute since we've looked at our thing, so let's go get a refresher real quick. What we need from this is basically 5 things. We need the weather description. Oops. We need the icon here. We need the miles per hour. We need the location, and then we need the temperature. So at this point, let's go ahead and I already know what that is, but let's go ahead and console.logout the open weather URL, and then we can take a look at the data before we just go ahead and output it. So here is our full URL. Let's look and see how the data is structured by just throwing it into our browser here. I use if you don't have a plugin, this is what it's going to come out looking like. If you use this JSON formatter extension, it'll make your life a lot easier. So close that. So you'll see weather here. We have main, and then we have description. So let's go ahead and get the description. Pretty straightforward. Go ahead and get rid of that. Let's go ahead and get rid of that as well. And this, let's create a vm.description. And this is going to be equal to our data.weather. And if we remember correctly, this is actually an array. So weather 0. So weather 0 dot description. The next thing we're going to need to get is the speed. So let's go ahead and look here. We have speed right here. So that's wind.speed. So we'll do vm dot speed is equal to data.wind.speed. Now this one's slightly different because it comes out in, I believe it's knots. We have to actually convert this to be miles per hour. So let's go ahead and do that right now. It's pretty straightforward. I just got this formula off of the internet, but a rough estimate is 2.237 times our return value, and then we want it down to basically one integer, so we can call it .toFix. This will bring it down to one space. So let's go ahead and console.log this out so we can see our new. Actually, while we're at it, let's forget everything I just did right here. Let's go ahead and show what it is before so we can actually see what we want to do. So we have data.windspeed. So we'll console.log out the speed. Or better yet, now that we're already outputting the data, let's go ahead and just do it like so. So we have our vm.description. So we can just output description. Save that. And you'll see now we have clear sky. Now let's go ahead and output the speed. And you'll see right here, this is 8.01, but this is actually in, I believe it's in knots, if I remember correctly. So we actually need to change that into miles per hour. So we're going to do 2.37 times wind speed. So there we go. This isn't, oh, this is supposed to be 2.37. There we go. 2.237. Sorry, guys. But you'll see this number is kind of big. Or the floating numbers, or the ones floating. So we're going to call toFix on it, and we want to get that down to one character. So now there, and there we go, 17.9. And while we're at it, we can go ahead and add some strings to it so that it makes a little bit more sense here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to concatenate a URL here. Or excuse me, our thing. And now this is going to be 17.9 miles per hour. So that's our speed. We then need the name. Excuse me, the is it data.name? Yeah, so name right here is location. So we're going to go ahead and put that out as well. So we're going to do vm.name. And I typically try and get these names somewhat similar to what they are in the database so that you know if you need to go back what it was you're trying to get. So that's why I kind of, normally I might call it location, but we're going to call it data.name because that's what it is there. And we'll go ahead and output that as well. We have data.name. Excuse me, just name. Forget what I just did there. And then finally, we're going to need to get the temperature, which I believe is in Kelvin, and we're going to do some things with that in a minute. So we'll do vm.temp. vm.temp. And this is going to be equal to data.main.temp. So here we go here. So this is temp. Now temp, I believe, is in Kelvin, So we're going to actually have to fix all of this. Now, I already did the math and whatnot, so let's go ahead and just create two variables here that you can kind of see. Now, the reason we're just going to convert this into two is the way that I ended up setting the button up. There's various ways we can do it. So let's call this vm.ftemp, and we'll set this equal to the formula here. Now, we're going to take our vm.temp that we got, and we're going to times it by 9/5. Then we're going to go ahead and minus 459 point. You know what? I'm actually just going to copy pasta this in here. I'm going to mess this up. So basically, we pass in a formula that's going to convert this into what we need it to, like so. And then we're going to change temp. We can go ahead and put, make this ftemp. So we can see that. You'll see right there, it's about 70 degrees right now. And then we're going to do the same thing for Celsius, vm.ctemp. And we're going to set it equal to this formula here, which is going to convert our Kelvin into Fahrenheit. And then finally, we're going to output this. Now, we have just basically finished everything that's going on in the get call. What we're going to be doing moving forward is we're going to, in the next video, this is going to be a two-part video. So we have all our data. We're now going to format it. We're going to add some functionality. The two things of functionality we're going to add is when you click the button, here, this needs to swap between the two. And then we're also going to add the functionality of the backgrounds changing based on what the description is for the sky. So that's how we're going to do that. We'll get started in the next video doing that. As always, guys, thank you for the support. Thank you for the for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if you're interested in supporting the channel, go over and check out my Patreon page. It is appreciated. Thank you to those who choose to do that. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching the video. Special thanks to our sponsor, Dev Mountain. Definitely check them out at devmountain.com. If you're looking for a bootcamp that's in front-end development, iOS, or UX, go ahead and give them a shot. Tuition includes housing, so you can get up and go and fully immerse yourself in the program. As always, thanks for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video.